Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Sunday Roast. I'm Phil Carroll.
And I'm Kevin Hornsby.
Sunday the 12th of March. The week that was, Snow bringing chaos to most of the UK, bringing it to the usual standstill with many schools closed. Drivers heading east across the Pennines from Greater Manchester have been stuck for several hours overnight as heavy snow fell on the M62 motorway. Not a problem for you out there, is it really, this? You when I sent you a picture the other day of the outside, when the snow had fallen, you were like, snow in March? I'm like, well, he's lost touch. I mean, March can be pretty cold, and we've actually had snow in April before.
Yeah, but it's not that usual that you have snow this heavy in March.
No, it's usually safe for January, February. But yeah, we've had it as late. I remember when the Beast from the East came in, was it 2018? I think it was 2018, and that was as late as the end of April. And it's bizarre. We've had April. We've had 36, 37 degrees before, and then we can get minus. I think it was minus 15 that year. So very, very bizarre fluctuations in temperature.
Yeah, no, God turned the heaters on here about a week ago. So mid 20s to high 20s every day.
Yeah,
but only for a few hours.
So the other bit of news this week, which has been very, very contentious, has been caused a lot of debate, is the news that Isabella Oakeshott, she's a British journalist. She was recently accused of crippling public trust in journalism after she obviously leaked several thousand, and it was 100,000 WhatsApp messages which were given to her in confidence by the former UK Health Secretary, Matt Hancock. Hancock was obviously going through a difficult time with his personal life in turmoil. He was obviously caught on CCTV, kissing his aide and groping her as well, which was pretty grim viewing. The scandal caused his downfall and subsequent resignation from the government. So Oakeshott came out, defended the decision to leak the messages, claiming that they were of significant public interest. So I guess the question I have is, does this really kind of damage public trust in journalism, right? A journalist and a ghostwriter, as she was trusted with this effectively confidential information, and she's gone and leaked it. I mean, what chance of any journalist going forward of getting the scoop on a story if they're going to potentially give out their, inform on them or give out information on their sources of this information? Surely that's just damaged and ruined journalism now going forward.
Yeah, I'm surprised that he gave them all the information in the first place, but that obviously is what happens, and journalist is supposedly to be trusted. Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, journalists are up in arms, but all information seems to be, what's the right word, pertinent to everybody, which is not really true, and it's not helpful either.
Yeah.
Often we know things that we shouldn't know, and it's not a good thing for us.
And that kind of brings me on to the next question is this whole kind of lack of trust now, and journalists and ghostwriters now feel pretty emboldened to share that private information about their clients, or will they or won't they? But at what point will AI become part of these notes or books? Because obviously AI isn't going to go and welch on it. They'll just process the information. We've seen how powerful this Chat GPT OpenAI is. Will it push some of these people who want these books written to use AI?
Yeah, when when the information can just be fed in, or it's already in the public domain, then AI is gonna be very useful. It might take weeks for somebody to personally go through something, and AI can do it in seconds?
Yeah. So there's no risk of personal bias or any ethical lapses there. So, but does it have the human intuition and judgment that are essential for good journalism? I mean, I must admit, some of the stories I've tried to feed in there and try and, let's say, condense or put in layman's terms, because a lot of these RNSs, when you read them, can be pretty technical, right? But we've put a few through, and they come out it's very intelligent, isn't it, the way it works, this ChatGPT?
Yeah, and it's only going to get more intelligent, because the more information it structures and the more information that goes through it, it's learning, isn't it? It's artificial intelligence, learning as it goes.
And it's getting more and more intelligent. So the other news we've had is Gary Lineker, his famous tweets criticising the government's asylum policy. He said he stands by his tweet and criticised the government, I think Suella Braverman was on there, wasn't she, saying it was despicable what he said, likening them to the sort of 1930s Nazis and their attitude towards, as you say, the asylum policy. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think a sports pundit should be commenting on political things like that?
Well, I think in this day and age, nobody can say anything, can they?
True.
It's like nobody can say anything. What he said is probably not far off the truth. If you look at the policies, they are draconian, they are not very pleasant, and the same type of policies were put in place in Germany at that time. So is he sort of factually incorrect? No, not really. But whoever wants to be offended can be offended. But because you are offended, what does that mean?
Exactly.
What does it mean? Because in today's day and age, it means a lot more than it did 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 40 years ago. If you're offended, you were offended. Unlucky, you got offended. Yeah, should a sports personality, sports presenter be saying those things? Well, in an open speech society, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? But the fact of the matter is,
there's no tolerance of it. There's no one's got a tolerance for anything that opposes their views, is it? It's just straight away, bang, slows it down and shut them up. But yeah, and to be honest with you, he was very much of, I think his response was like, well, if I get suspended, I get suspended. I guess money's not a problem to him. It's not like he needs it. And I guess if he stands by it, then fair play to him.
Yeah, he'll get done by BBC, and then someone else will take him.
He'll be on GB News next week, so it'll be one of those. But we've got an action-packed show for you this week. We've got two special guests. The first one is Allan Syms, Executive Chairman of Cizzle Biotechnology. Welcome, Allan. How's things?
Yeah, good, and great to speak to you. Looking forward to discussing Cizzle Biotechnology with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good starting point, isn't it? Let's literally wind it right back to the beginning and tell the listeners and us as well exactly what Cizzle Biotechnology is all about, Allan.
Okay, it was a good starting point to begin with. And I don't wish to be macabre, but I'm going to give you a stat here, which it sort of really drives this. Not only the discovery of the science, but, why do we do this? And it's a really unfortunate fact that by the end of this day, 5,000 people in the world would have died of lung cancer in a single day. Lung cancer is the biggest killer of all the cancers by far. And for that many people to die every year, you have to ask the real question, well, why is that? Why are so many people dying of lung cancer? I mean, people die of all cancers, but, that is the biggie. And why is that? And one of the reasons for that is it's very asymptomatic. In other words, it's that disease that you don't know you have, and you don't know you have it for quite a long time. And then when you do get symptomatic, it's already advanced. And the problem with that means is that because the survival rates in advanced cancer are so low, I mean, they can be as low as 10% over a 5-year period. Whereas if you did detect it early when it was not symptomatic, then, the survival rates could be as high as 90%. So, the challenge there, the big problem that's out there is how do you do something about moving that dial from 10% to 90%. So there's the problem. There's the challenge area. And it's not blind. I mean, the NHS and every other health provider around the world, they understand that this is a major issue. And in fact, the big cancer research institutes who do such a great job for us all, they've been pushing this button for a long time now, which is, look, we need to detect early to save lives. And that's the strap line of our company, which we're in the business of early cancer detection, and in particular lung cancer. And I'll go on and explain the history about that. But in the first instance is, what can we do about detecting lung cancer early? Because it's such a big problem, and therefore millions are being thrown at trying to resolve this, but there aren't good solutions out there. And in fact, the actual cost to lose people from lung cancer is huge. I mean, these again are horror story figures, but the cost generally to the world from cancer is estimated to be like $25 trillion. And that's not just because of cancer care. It's about, people stop work early. They stop, paying their tax dollars. They take people out of the working community because people got to care for them. There's all the hospital costs. There's all the treatment costs. There's so much in the economy that this costs. It's not just about the fact that some poor person has lost their life to it. It is because there is huge economic burden that it brings with us. So that starts getting you into, how is the justification for spending money on trying to solve the problem? Something called health economics. And the health economic argument, until recently, has not been strong enough to actually say we should screen for lung cancer. And part of that is because current methodology, even the gold standards, are not very good. And this is not to say that, the current standards shouldn't be done. And so don't get me wrong. But currently, the gold standard is something called CT scanning. And CT scanning is sort of a sophisticated three-dimensional X-ray that people give you and look at to see if they can find early stage lung cancer. And CT scanning gets it wrong, and it can get it wrong 9 times out of 10. That means that if you're a patient that's turned up incidentally, because it's not a screening program, you've had an accident, you've fallen off your bike, you've got an infection, and you have an X-ray or you have a CT scan, and a CT scan shows that you have some anomaly, some small nodule. Well, the assumption is that has to be treated as a potential lung cancer, even if it's not. But that means that 9 out of 10 people are being put into the so-called cancer care pathway and they don't have it, let alone the trauma in your mind of thinking you might have it. There's a whole onward cost for doing it. So it is a massive problem because you can't detect it early. It's a massive problem because it costs so much money. And it's a massive problem because the gold standard isn't good enough to actually move that dial. So we actually stop having a dial that says people survival rates are only 10% and move it more towards 90%. So that's the reason why Cizzle Biotech got created, is to challenge and deal with that problem. And so if you want to box that into one component about, well, there's the big problem, then the next big box is, what is the solution? And in part, this is why the company is called Cizzle Biotechnology. It just so happens...
It's nothing to do with cooking bacon, so you can...
Well, it is a Sunday, right?
Smell...
and we are supposed to be roasting stuff. As long as you don't roast me, all right.
So this is this the Cis1b, the gene? Is that related?
Yeah, well, good intro to that. Yes, there is a normal gene in all of us called Cis1. And it's a gene that is important in terms of controlling your DNA and how it replicates, and therefore how your cell replicates. So it's very involved in the normal functioning of your cell, controlling your cell, not letting it getting into a position where it can replicate in some sort of uncontrolled fashion. So Cis1 is a normal functioning gene. It's very important to us. But there is a variant of it, which is called Cis1b, and that's Kevin, as you mentioned, Cis1b. Cis1b is a variant of a normal functioning protein that has lost some amino acids. It's lost functionality. In other words, we're not sure how this mechanism works, but what we know is that this particular protein no longer functions as it should do, and therefore that's important to understand why that's so. And so the research that was done many years ago at the University of York under Professor Dawn Coverley's research group was to understand, what is Cis1, how does it normally function, and what are these variants, Cis1b, what are they doing there, and how important is that? And then, people have light bulb moments, but in this particular case, it was a discovery that Cis1b isn't staying where it should stay. In other words, it's produced in a cell, it's produced where the nucleus, i.e. the center of the cell, is. But she found Cis1b in the blood. And so, well, that's very interesting. How is Cis1b getting into the blood? Well, we don't really know, but it's there. And so that was very interesting. And so she had the really bright thought of saying, well, look, is this important to any disease states? And then came the big discovery that what she found was that the presence of Cis1b in the blood is highly correlated with the presence of early stage lung cancer. Absolutely a phenomenal thing, because then you have a potential biomarker for early stage lung cancer. And that sounds all great, but actually this discovery surprised, I think, many people. And the reason for that is that there is a whole group of people that around the world in the diagnostics business, in the pharmaceutical area, that would believe that, sampling a blood or taking a blood sample is the ideal way to measure anybody's health state. And we all go in, as soon as you go to hospital, somebody sticks a needle in you and they go off and look at all your various parameters. The idea of a simple blood test rather than having to send you into a hospital and have a CT scan or some other means of doing it would be the ideal solution if you could measure something of relevance. So people have been doing this for a long time, and you will probably hear this cancer test and that cancer test that says it's great, and we can detect cancer by a blood sample. And it's true, you can, especially if the cancer is advanced. In other words, if you've got a big tumor that's spitting off bits of cells or proteins or DNA from it, then you're going to probably easily measure that in the blood because the tumor's quite advanced. But when you're talking about a stage 1 lung cancer, in other words, at the very earliest stage, when it's the size of less than the size of a grain of rice, which is producing something that might accidentally get into the bloodstream, then the quantities are going to be really, really low.
So it's almost like an anomaly you're looking for, that early stage marker.
Yeah.
Traditional methods, I think you've got CEA, ProGRP, NSE in different ways. But you say by the time that these are detected, it's almost too late. It's the progression. It's already too late almost.
Well, I think, Phil, the issue is that this is a game of quantity. In other words, most assays can only detect a certain level of proteins or cells. And if there is very little of it there, then it's really hard to detect it. And also the blood's really good at getting rid of things that shouldn't be there. So, anything that does get in there is going to get metabolized away and removed very quickly. And that would also be true for CIS1B, except for a very strange thing that we also discovered, which is that CIS1B doesn't go away. It stays in the blood. And then we thought, well, that's really odd, because not only should it only be there in very small quantities, but actually there's so much of it there, you can detect it in a finger prick of blood.
Yeah.
Well, so then the question is, why is so much of this particular protein there that's highly associated with stage 1 lung cancer? And it turns out that the answer is that it binds to a big protein in the blood called fibrinogen. So it's a bit like having a magic sponge in your blood. So this protein gets sucked up by this sponge and it protects it. So rather than the level go down, the level goes up. And so, the company's entire reason for being here is because we have intellectual property that protects our assay to detect the presence of this CIS1B together with this sponge, or chaperone being the correct sort of terminology for it, in the blood. So for whatever reasons, nature has thrown us the opportunity to detect something that ought to be really detectable using an assay. And so over the last 10, 12 years, we've really got to understand what CIS1 is about, get to understand what CIS1B is, harden some tests for it. And the bottom line is the early trial work we've done with it is very promising indeed, to the point where we have an assay sensitivity of 95%. That's sort of unheard of for this. So this is a really major big breakthrough in early lung cancer screening.
So the question that's screaming at me is this only applicable to lung cancer? Or do we...
That's a great question.
Or do we have the ability maybe that this also affects other types of cancer?
Really good input, because you picked up on what I said early on, which is CIS1 is a normal functioning protein controlling cell division. And if it's true for lung cells, it's probably true for every cell. It's a generic cell replication regulating protein. So you would imagine that maybe it's not just lung. So we've looked. You're quite right. We've looked. And the answer is, we think, yes, it probably is in other cells as well. I'm not saying today this is a generic cancer marker. People get in big trouble if they say things like that. But my view being is that, look, if it's a normal functioning protein in all cells, and we know that when we've looked at lung cancer, there's such a high correlation, particularly early stage, then the probability is that it's true for other cancers. And so we have looked, and yes, the early results we've seen are very promising. And obviously, that's something which we told the market about, that we're going to look at that more widely. That will be one of the development programs going forward.
Very good. So the test, if you like, itself, what actually physically happens with this test? Yes, you take some blood, but how do you detect this CIS1B?
Yeah, CIS1B. So the format of it depends on what is the question you're asking. And there are two principal questions you need to ask. The first is, if somebody has already been diagnosed as having a potential cancer, so let's just go back to that CT scanning, and let's look at the 9 people in 10 that actually have been told they might have lung cancer but don't. In other words, they are what is known as false positives. And so in the first instance, what you want to do is rule them out. You want a test that can go alongside CT. It's not meant to replace CT. CT is a very powerful tool. So from the viewpoint of having an ideal test, you want CT scan, and then you want a laboratory test that anybody that becomes or is seen to be positive then gets their blood tested for Cis1b. And if we can rule those people out, we'll save the health service millions of pounds, simply because, we're saving people going into the cancer care pathway, let alone giving those people, the benefit of thinking, oh God, I don't have cancer after all. So now that laboratory test means you take a blood sample, you'll send it to the pathology laboratory where they will extract from it the serum that's there. And then they use what is known as an antibody test to detect the presence of the protein. So we're measuring a protein. We're not measuring nucleic acids. We're not looking at cells. We're not doing histopathology. We're actually taking a blood sample, and then we are using an antibody assay. And for your sort of audience that may not know what antibodies are, those are the proteins that our body produces to ward off disease, viruses, bacteria, and for that matter, cancer. It's what, when you have a vaccination, stimulates the production of antibodies that will then defend you. So we have isolated those antibodies. So a core part of our test is to know that we have antibodies that are very specific to Cis1b. And then on those antibodies, you can put what is known as a reporter molecule. And what by that is that something lights up. So the presence of the antibody can either fluoresce, or it can be an enzyme that turns a colorless liquid into a colored liquid. But one way or the other, wherever the antibody is, you will see a color or a light. And the antibody is only going to be there if it binds Cis1b. So wherever there is Cis1b, you're going to see a light or some signal that says, yes, you've got Cis1b present. So that, in the first instance, is the immunoassay, as it's known, for looking at Cis1b. So that's the ruling out bit. But there's another big advantage of looking at a protein, because what we also want to do is rule people in, and that's what you call screening. So in other words, all those people out there that want to have a screen for lung cancer, that means taking a small sample of blood. I've already mentioned to you about the idea of a finger prick of blood, and using it in some sort of point of care test. We're all familiar now with COVID tests, these lateral flow tests. So this is not yet in development, but it is something that we would like to do for the future, which is to imagine a system where we had a lateral flow type device. So you take a finger prick of blood, you put it onto a small sort of lateral flow stick, or perhaps some other biosensor, or some simple thing that could be done in a doctor's office, or could be done in a chemist shop, in a pharmacy, somewhere where there's a health professional. Because I think you need to make sure you do the test right. And if there's a positive response, you need a health professional there to advise you on what the next steps are. But that is the future, which is a simple, inexpensive means of rapidly screening populations to determine whether they do or don't have Cis1b present.
Very good. It all sounds sort of almost revolutionary in terms of the ability to save both time, stress, money, effort to solve these situations, especially with lung cancer around the world. So that's all well and good. But as investors, how are we going to make money out of this? What has Cizzle started to do?
Yeah, so Syzzle has been working hard ever since we came to the market. Well, before we came to the market even, but ever since then, we've been very much more commercially focused, which is that, we do think that, we have a huge obligation to do exactly what you just said, which is return a very healthy return to our shareholders. So that money, as much as possible, is all applied to the development of those products I just referred to. But having a great product doesn't necessarily get you revenue. So what you really need is partners. I mean, we're a small company, and our strategy is not to have large overheads. So number one is we keep our overheads very low indeed, and we contract out. to expert groups every bit of the jigsaw puzzle that we need to make the entire picture. So for the antibody production, we go to a specialist company for antibodies. For the assay development, we go to a company that specializes in assays. And then you go to people that are experts of bringing product to market, in market. And we've already signed 2 really important deals for us. One in China, which have a huge problem in terms of potential sort of lung cancer, because smoking is a big issue in China. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, and this is not a go at the smokers of the world, but 80% of cancer, lung cancer, is caused by smoking. So wherever there is high smoking, you have high lung cancer. And the second deal we did is in the United States, which is a very sophisticated, very knowledgeable country for bringing a product to market. And just to sort of give you an indication of the problem even in the USA that they have is that every year about 250,000 people get diagnosed with lung cancer. And as I said earlier in this interview, most of that, in fact, 80% of it, is already quite well advanced. So it's not too late for those people, but their chances of long-term survival are quite low. So there's 250,000 people have, lung cancer every single year. That means if 80% of them are already advanced, that means there's a huge number of people that have got stage 1 lung cancer that don't know, probably millions. And then there is an even larger group that might be at risk. So the smoking fraternity, people at a certain age, people who've got other lung conditions like COPD and fibrosis. So the number of people that would really benefit from this test in the USA is very large. So you're not going to do that. Cizzle Biotech is not going to go to the United States. It will take years for us to get penetration. So we partnered up with a group called CorePath. CorePath are a specialist oncology pathology group. And they see the need for this, and they are working with us so that we can bring this product to the USA. And they service 22 states and really understand the whole mechanism of reimbursement, how you get the big health providers to pay for these tests, what the pricing would be, what the distribution models are. And the same goes in China. We have a specialist group. They're setting up a subsidiary purely just to bring Cizzle Biotechnology to market. So we've already got our foot in 2 countries when we're ready with the product to actually accelerate bringing it. What most importantly to us should be is to people, so that the test makes a difference to their life. In other words, one of our ambitions, save lives.
So basically that partnership includes, I think, is a proposed 15% royalty and royalty sharing agreements from the RNS.
Yes, it does. So in the USA, it's 15%. In China, it's 10%. But in China, they're setting up a specific business. They are spending millions in developing that business. We don't have to put a single penny of our shareholders' money into developing that market. Most of the people know China is a very difficult market to enter into. You're only going to do that with very close Chinese partnership that really know the mechanism, the system. So they will fund all of that. Same thing goes in the States. They're funding, they're investing a lot of their resource, their people, their time to do this. Again, we're not spending money. So as a consequence, this is a great way of leveraging up our position without developing large overheads. So effectively, it's a licensing type model into the world's big markets. So you can then see that efficient model for us, that means very low overheads, extremely high gross margins for products. Because we're not doing any of the go-to-market costs. So when we get that money, it's effectively to our bottom line.
And you will receive 15% of what? The revenue that's generated, or
minus taxes, but of revenue. So
revenue,
it's top line, other than it being tax and whatever the local thing. So in other words, the money they get, we get 15% of that.
I mean, it is very good, but certainly in the US, the margins on these type of things are astronomical in terms of percentages, but that's a good thing for you as well, obviously, with the revenues. So you're in the 2 biggest markets, or potentially you're in the 2 biggest markets as soon as you have a test ready. So the rest of the world is still open to you to go in yourself, or you're looking for partners in Europe, you're looking for partners in the UK. What's happening there?
I think, you raise a number of really important points there, which is that China and USA are important markets. There are other major markets in the world. India, for example, we've not really started any work there. Europe as a block, very important as well. But one of the key things we have to be very aware of is the regulatory constraints upon bringing a product to market, which is that, as with any clinical test, it has to satisfy certain accreditation. And in Europe, that's usually through the CE mark. And it's different in the UK now. It's post-Brexit. We have our own version of that called a UKCA mark. But in the States, it's a single body. It's the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. It's a single body in China. So it's very efficient to go to a single body covering a very large market. In Europe, it's a bit more complex. So we definitely do want European partners, but we've also got slightly higher challenges to bring in that. And, it, in a way, it's criminal that here we are, a British company, where, our number one customer should really be the NHS. We want to get it in there. So we will work very closely with the NHS, and we will work closely with the cancer research bodies that, provide access to clinical trials. And, we are absolutely determined to make sure that, a British company provides a British solution to lung cancer. But in the first instance, the economics of it drive you towards markets like the USA and China simply because of volume. But we can't do it on our own. And so we will need to do this through partnerships that can help us with different product platforms. The big diagnostic companies of the world, the Siemens and the Abbotts and those type of players, they have their own platform. They have their own standard basis on which to bring their products into the pathology laboratory. And so they're not going to just buy our product and then put that alongside theirs. They will want to license our technology and our antibodies and build it on their own platform. So they provide, the big corporates provide a mechanism for us to bring technology on their platforms for them to build and for them to go to market, and that would be great. We have our ability to make our own products, in which we will have partners that can manufacture the smaller kits, and there are distribution partners that can do that. So there'll be all sorts of manner of specialist partners, whether they be big corporates or smaller development groups that we will want to work with, and our door's open. We want to speak to anybody that can help us get this product to market faster.
Not only that as well, Alan, I believe there was an agreement that was signed where you acquired a 5% economic interest in the commercialization of the AZD 1656, I think was being developed by Conduit Pharmaceuticals. Do you want to just tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Sure, because this brings us into an area which is called companion diagnostics. And just so your listeners can understand what is a companion diagnostic, by its name, by its very nature, it's a companion to something. And that something is a drug or some sort of treatment therapy. And, it has been going on for a number of years now. But one of the really important facets that drug companies face today is to ensure that they have selected the right people for their clinical trials and the right people for the treatment. There is no point in giving a drug which may have side effects, and many cancer drugs do have side effects. There's no point in giving a drug to somebody who would never respond. And so you have to identify the non-responders. You have to, it's a technical term, but it's called stratification. You have to stratify your patient cohort so that you can select out the people that would most likely benefit from a particular treatment and select out those that won't. And that's important right from the get-go, which is, in other words, when you start developing the drug, before it even becomes a drug, before you get into clinical trials, you shouldn't be putting people into a clinical trial that were never going to respond and actually putting those people at risk. The answer is, from a health and safety viewpoint, make sure that you've got the right people to give the drug. And that is so-called a companion diagnostic. So Conduit Pharmaceuticals, very interesting group that we've had a long relation and a good relation going forward with. They are in the business of what we call repurposing drugs. And that means that there are many drugs big pharmaceutical companies decide for one reason or another not to take to market. And these drugs may well have passed all of the toxicity data, be safe in man, develop right through to what's known as a phase 2 clinical trial. That's very advanced. Millions have been spent on it to get to that point. And then for whatever reason, they decide they're not going to continue with it, and it sits on the shelf. I mean, that's terrible waste of all those millions that have gone in. But it's very difficult. I mean, if not every drug will make it, as we well know, that the chance of a drug from its inception to get to the market is very small. And hence the reason it can cost multiple billions of dollars to bring a new pharmaceutical to market and take a long time, like 10 years. Yeah. So many drugs get left by the wayside. So Conduit decided through a very interesting charitable route to ask some of the big pharmaceutical companies, and in this case it was AstraZeneca, to donate their phase 2 drugs to a charity, that the charity would raise independent money, reassess whether there were other things that this drug could do. And they looked in a particular diabetes drug. This is the AZD1656 that you mentioned. This was designed for diabetes, and they used it for treating COVID. And the COVID clinical trial was extraordinarily successful and saved lives by giving people this particular drug. And it turns out the reason for it is it's a drug form that's what's known as an immunomodulator. That might sound a bit of a mouthful, but what it's basically doing is it's dampening down the immune response when people, for example, get infected by COVID. So the virus is there, they get a massive
stops those cytokine storms or whatever they're called.
Exactly. So you've got this situation where people are dying not of the virus, but they're dying because the own body has become hyperstimulated, and effectively their body's immune system is killing them. Well, if you extend that story, there's a whole bunch of disease states where the human body is reacting against itself. And these are known as autoimmune diseases. And an example of that would be psoriasis. So the argument is, if this particular drug is actually a more general autoimmune drug, then that's a new company. And so what they were after was a companion diagnostic that would look at a particular part of that, something called T regulatory cells, which are important in terms of lung inflammation because of the COVID work. And we know that inflammation of the lung, particularly things such as fibrosis or other inflammatory diseases, can be linked to lung cancer. So there was a connection to, well, could we build them a companion diagnostic? And so we signed an agreement with the charity to develop. That's £1 million contract for the company. But in doing so, we also acquired rights, some of the royalty rights to that drug. And now we have a new option agreement, which we put out through RNS in November, that says we can convert that into actually owning shares in Conduit. And the value that was given to those is 3.25 million. So at some point in the future, we will own stock in another business that, if we wish, we could sell and realize capital, which would be non-dilutory to our shareholders, which I think is a very attractive thing. So decisions haven't yet been made about where we are. It's in the marketplace. People know about that relationship, and perhaps they don't realize the monetary value of that, even though it was in the RNS.
Yeah, but I thought I'd raise it because it looked like a good agreement. I mean, I was just reading through. I mean, maybe this has changed because you mentioned that it's been switched maybe to stock. But I think under the original agreement, Cizzle would receive 5% of all sums received by SGS pursuant to any AstraZeneca commercialization or sublicense commercialization of an asset for obviously inflammatory pulmonary and cardiovascular disease. So would that be more profitable than taking and selling those shares down in keeping that 5%, would you think?
Well, so here's the issue, which is what I already sort of mentioned earlier, which is the time it takes to take a drug to market can be up to 10 years.
Sure.
And there's no guarantee that it'll ever be there. And so if you ask me the question in 7 or 8 years from now, when the drug's been very successful, then you'd say you'd likely get a bigger return. But that's 7 or 8 years from now. But it's also, from our viewpoint, it's an option. We don't have to. We're actually now expanding our interest because we have an option to acquire shares. And they have other drugs in their pipeline, which means at the moment we only have one asset with a royalty, and that is AZD1656, and those indications of pulmonary and cardiovascular disease. Well, now we have the right to convert that to shares covering all of their assets. It's difficult to say what is the right time to do these things, but I like the right to have flexibility. I like to have the flexibility that I can convert it to cash. I like the flexibility we can have shares, and I like the flexibility as we don't have to do this if we don't want to. So I think we've actually engineered a position for the business which gives us the maximum opportunity to crystallize some value for our shareholders.
And I'll take it it's not a one-off thing. You don't have to take 3.25 million. You can take £1 million and keep 2.25 million of shares and see how things go with this company. When is this company going to come to market? In which market will it come?
Well, Conduit Pharmaceuticals announced at the end of last year, they're doing something called a de-SPAC. And what that is that they are reversing themselves into effectively the same as we started our life, which is a cash shell. So they will reverse into that cash shell. That was announced last year, and probably it'll be sector, but we'll leave that to the company to decide when and as they do that. All I know from our perspective is the fact that they've announced that gives a great deal of confidence to us that, there's something going to be happening very positive there in the near term. So, from my viewpoint, we continue to want to work very closely with them, and will work closely with them to develop not only the companion diagnostic, but to have a real asset value in being part of their journey.
So these tests and the situation that you need to provide to both the US situation and the Chinese situation, when is it likely that you will be handing them over to them and saying, there you go, there's the test?
I wish I could give you a straight answer to that, and I can't. But if I could answer it, I'd be straight in with an RNS to tell the world about it as well. All I could say is that, look, we've been working really hard developing, and we're making good progress on this. We equally have a responsibility to the market. If things were going very badly wrong, we'd also have to tell the market that. And the answer is that that's not the case. So, things are progressing extremely well. So I think the best I can do is watch this space.
Okay. Again, I'm going to ask the questions that no CEO wants to answer. But if you looked at the size of the market in China and looked at the size of the market in America and assumed nothing else happened other than these two situations, what type of revenue could you expect in terms of what magnitude of revenue is possible from these two situations? Let's say we're 2 years down the line, and then 3 years and 5 years. I mean, what magnitude of revenue are you talking about?
So let's get to the point about CEOs not wanting to answer it. Actually, I think most CEOs would like to answer that. I'd like to answer that, and I'd like to give you an exact sort of pinpoint view of where that is. But what we do, because we're not supposed to do that for many regulatory reasons, whatever we might feel, is you'll appoint third parties to give you a view on that. And we, as with many public companies, use independent analysts to view what they think the market is and what the opportunity might be. And we've had several analyst reports on the business, when we came to market back in 21, and following that as well. Hardman are a very well-respected group. Hardman have done several valuations on the business. Business was worth 27 million when it came to market. I would argue we've done a lot to progress the business since that time. We all know last year the markets were awful. There was a decline in many of the biotech stocks. But even taking into account that Hardman's last view, and that's without any of the real knowledge about where the business is going, was still the company should be worth 23 million. And the company, even though it's been very volatile in its share price of late, is still way under that valuation. So then you come to the question, well, why do they get to that sort of valuation? And it's in part time related, because if you ask the question 5 years from now and the product's in market and we've got big market penetration, that's great. If you ask the question now, there's a risk factor that says, well, it could take longer. Perhaps it costs more, who knows? And therefore, you're going to discount that back. Nonetheless, I would argue in the first instance that says you look at the independent research and you say, well, what do they say? Rather than necessarily what I say. The second thing is, I've already said to you that, in the USA, if 250,000 people are diagnosed every year, and then therefore the number of people that don't know they have it could be several millions. And then if you actually start looking at what the costs or for a kit could be in the States, I've seen reports of anything between a few $100s to several $1,000s for cancer tests in the USA. So you work out how many millions of people might want this test and how much they might want to be paying, and we get 15% back. Gives you a very, very large number. In China, our partners have been quite open about what they think the opportunity is. They've said they think the opportunity in China is 30 million tests a year. Now, I'm not saying they're going to get 30 million tests day one. They won't. It takes time to build a marketplace, but they're saying 30 million. And then the next thing is, well, what sort of price might you get? Well, they would love to charge $100 a test. That's huge. So both in the USA and in China, what we're saying is the market size opportunity is enormous. And I don't want to put numbers to it. And I've just given the figures. Anybody can calculate what they think that might be. And we know that we're going to get 10% or 15%. However, I can't tell you how long it's going to take to get that market penetration. I can't confirm the pricing that actually will be received in those marketplaces. And who knows what might happen with anybody else that might come to the market with other tests. So I'll put the usual caveats, as you'd expect me to say. All I'm saying is that it's very large indeed. And so for a company that's got great intellectual property, is one of the only companies I think I know that has a single protein biomarker with the level of performance that we get from it, positions us into being a very exciting company. And that's why I get very, very animated sometimes and very excited, not just because I think the company's going to be very successful, but I think we really have a shot moving that dial from only 10% survivability towards where it should be, which is 90%. One of our goals right from the very start. Let's detect early, save lives. That is what we're about. And in doing so, we can make a very interesting return to our shareholders.
Very good. It sounds very promising. And as you say, it's a technology that will save lives and change people's lives as well.
Very much so.
Very good.
But I think you can do the sums from what you've said, and the potential is in the hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of revenue to Syms Biotech. But actually the bigger issue is probably to prevent this. So the asymptomatic tests is really where, you could have 100 million tests a year and more in America alone for the people who don't have it and want to prove they don't have it. And the same in China, and the same in India, and the same in Europe, and the same in the UK. Just like women go for, breast cancer tests, it's the same thing. And could it be $50 a head and just, you prick the blood, as you said, and a lateral flow test? Then you're talking about billions of dollars a year, not hundreds of millions. So yeah, the opportunity is vast. How long will it take? Not sure. And you're not sure either in terms of the penetration, but the savings to the medical establishment, if you like, is going to be absolutely vast. So I think the take-up might be quicker than everybody anticipates once you get this FDA approval and the different approvals that are required. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. And yeah, to have a market capitalization now of £12 million is interesting.
Yeah, we hope so. And, our view right now is that, I want to plug on, get everything done that we've got in our development plans. Our number one priority is get this test out there, and then people can start using sort of the early uptake and the fact we have a test out there, and people start putting some numbers around that become a little bit more meaningful, because you'll then know exactly what the price is, and we'll know what the uptake is like. And I think at that time, investors can have a much, much better view of what the company's prospects look like. But, at this stage, the market is just huge. And, we believe we have a very unique solution for addressing that. So, so we're very, very, very positive in the company right now.
Yeah. And I think your IP is worth more than the current market capitalization, along with your other asset that you hold. I think that is fair for me to say, because anyone would take this on and know that it was worth significantly more than it is.
There's a good old view about intellectual property, which is that it's worth nothing if you don't ever make a product from it, right? On the other hand, if you do make a product, then it's worth a lot. So the view right now is that we hope the IP is going to be worth a lot.
Okay, well, I think on that note, we've talked for long enough, and we wish you all the best, Allan, in the future, and obviously, hopefully, coming back on and updating the market in due course.
Great.
But before you go, being that this is the Sunday roast, we will ask you the all-important question, the burning question: what is your perfect Sunday roast?
Well, you see, now you're going to get me into a much more difficult question than anything you've asked me thus far, because I'm afraid I'm not particularly vegan in my outlook. So you better give me some roast beef. And, since our company was spun out from the University of York, how could I not have a Yorkshire pudding?
Oh, yeah. You can't beat them, can you? Especially homemade ones when they the size of sort of, I don't know, Kev's hair, his bouffant, that sort of size.
Something like that.
Filled with onion gravy, or just gravy, or
no, you got a bit of onion gravy, I think, yeah,
and lots of vegetables.
Something like that. And now I already feel like I've sort of put on 2 pounds in weight just thinking about it.
And some horseradish sauce.
Of course.
And then a nice glass of red wine.
It all goes together well, doesn't it? It's the perfect combination.
And then a bit of a snooze in the chair afterwards.
Might have to.
Very good. Well, on that note, we'll just say thanks very much for your time. Allan Syms, Executive Chairman of Cizzle Biotechnology.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Allan.
So on to our second guest this week. We're joined by Shaun Day, CEO of Greatland Gold. Welcome, Shaun. How's things? You look pretty tight. I'm not not being rude, but you do look quite tight. I'm sure you've had a whirlwind 48 hours in London.
Yeah, gentlemen. Great to see you, Phil, Kevin, and thanks for having me on the roast. Yeah, look, coming up to London and a super busy schedule this week, so I am running on vapors. But please,
how many times did you get Newcrest and Newmount mixed up as a name?
Lots, and my background, Newcrest was once upon a time a spin-off of Newmont, hence the name similarity, which does me no favours.
Yeah, I heard that actually in one of the things that you did, that actually this is like the baby coming home, or they're going to rebuy the farm, because effectively Newmount, peeled off Newcrest. Newcrest has developed itself. Newmount's now coming in and it's probably going to buy it. Yeah, we're not going to go into all the details about whether they should or whether they shouldn't or why, because you've done that a million times this week. But what I got from what you said was that whether it's Newcrest carrying on or Newmount, you're very happy.
Look, they're both world-class organisations. Good to be joint venture
That
partners.
was a yes or no answer.
They're both world-class, yes.
Yes, they're both world class. That wasn't the question.
Okay, but the interesting thing that did come out about, without going into too much detail, is that if Newmount do it, actually Havron isn't that big of an asset in terms of some of the other assets that Newcrest has. So that was very interesting as far as I was concerned, because that opens the door to many other situations that could happen, and that's very exciting, isn't it?
It is indeed exciting. Look, we can't tell the future, but I think history tells you when large entities merge or take over, there is a tidy up of portfolios. We think Havron's super high quality, but we're certainly going to be a really interested party in that. It's exciting.
Yeah, and because of all the back work that you've done in the past and the quality of the board and all the different things that you've put in place now, you are in a position to actually be, the guy with big boy pants.
I think a huge focus of mine has been to ensure that we are seen as a credible counterparty, whether that be a whole new opportunity or something closer to home. And I think you're exactly right. Who we can now go and be counterparts with, and perhaps some of the brand names or size of companies that we can now transact with, I think is transformationally different than 2 years ago. And that was by design.
Yeah. And you probably can't say it, okay, but I can. And I think if Newmont do buy Newcrest, then I think your potential to have major uplift event in terms of the share price is going to be astronomical. I think this is going to happen. There's going to be a lot of interest around you straight away.
That's an interesting perspective. Yeah, as you say, it's probably not something I'm going to comment on the share price, but look, it's fascinating. We're interested. We have a front row seat. Both outcomes are good, but it's really interesting.
Okay, so you're on the Sunday roast and you're exhausted. What is the meal that you would like to have right now?
Look, right now, I think we might be on a pretty Spartan diet. I think I've done a bit of an eating tour of England with breakfast, lunch and dinner commitments, which sound better than they are when you stack them on top of each other. So right now, I think cheese on toast might be about as much as I can.
Welsh rabbit.
I can, and curling up with a book, but no, it's good. It's lovely to be in England. It's a cracking city, so in London. So yeah, look, it's good to be here, and I love. Well, without digressing too much, I love the history of the place. So honestly, I can walk around London even when it's a bit chilly and just be as happy as a clam.
Okay, so let's move away from the Newcrest business, because ultimately that's going to rectify itself in the next few months, I think. Just tell us a little bit about Scallyway and how you see that effectively this drilling campaign that has started and is going to continue, how potentially good this could be for Greatland.
So we think the Paddington is our core area. We think giving ourselves option value in exploration is huge, and we are really focused on ways to upgrade that option value around exploration in the portfolio. The Scallywag, look, the reality is these are the best holes we've had. We've hit mineralization. We've got geophysical targets. We've drilled them. In one case, we're just over the top of it. We've done the pre-collar. We now know there's gold there. Now, that just makes the target more interesting to us. We know mineralization is in the area where we're hoping it would be, and there's a big geophysical target. That's Prospect A35. Jumping across to Pearl. In this case, we're down into diamond drill rig. We've done some more testing. It's the biggest conductive target we have in the portfolio now. We're right next to it. Again, we've hit mineralization, 1,350 gram silver. That's half ounce or better than half ounce.
Yeah, I saw that. Does that mean potentially there could be a big silver deposit there as well?
Well, I actually really like silver. Gold over time, I think, is better than silver, but silver's good. And if you have a look at something like Telfer, look, it's a gold mine, then a copper mine, but there is also silver there. So these things are found together. But look, something heavily weighted to silver would actually be pretty neat right now. But there's also copper, 0.35 copper. It's a big conductive. There's a higher percentage, not necessarily by value, but by metal contact and conductivity around the copper there. So we really like that target. And again, we've got a target we like from surface. We've got more information on it now, and we know there's mineralization, and in this case, even high-grade mineralization in that area. So it makes the target more interesting, as is not unusual. Retract all the core. We think we lost, I think it was about 70 meters of core right around that intercept. So that kind of leaves a bit of a question mark there. We'll drill it again and get some more information. But we've hit mineralization where we were hoping we would. And, as we always do, we now recalibrate, and we think the geophysical target is a small step away. So we want to come down and try to bullseye that, and then we'll recalibrate and we'll refine the model again. But this is good. We have mineralization where we're hoping mineralization, a confluence between a geophysical target and some mineralization. Look, I don't want to overstate it though. We have not drilled. We haven't drilled the targets really that we want to drill. This is nice. They are now higher ranked targets than they were before, and they were already kind of towards the top of the deck. But one swallow a summer makes. I'm excited, but I also I don't want people to feel this is more than it is. It's high grade exploration targets. Which is good, and the exploration team is excited about it.
That's a yes then.
Yes.
No, I mean, it does look interesting. As you said, we cannot turn around and say, oh, we found Havron too, because it's not the case. But there is potential there that you have another opportunity to find another fantastic resource. And the reality is that Patterson is obviously loaded with minerals. No matter what they may be, whether it's, as you say, gold, silver, copper. I mean, the 0.35 copper now would be seen as fantastic. This is a mine, just on its own with the copper, based on some of the other stuff that we're seeing in the world, and the fact that copper is, going to be in deficit, going forward. So I haven't any more questions. Have you, Phil?
No, just wrapping up that saying I think there's a lot to look forward to. Obviously, ASX listing was mentioned. Obviously you're putting a lot of new board members in place, aces in places, which looks very exciting. And obviously the FS for Havron and other assets as well to come. So I think shareholders and listeners have got a lot to look forward to with this exciting company.
We like to think so. We like to think there's a lot of optionality around how this year plays out. We're active. I think we have a team to execute, and the plan here is to give ourselves in the best position to increase the probabilities of success. And I like to think we're well down the track of positioning ourselves in that way.
Yeah, and the ASX is going to be exciting as well. I think that there for sure is going to be buyers if actually Newcrest is taken over by Newmont. Then there's going to be a lot of cash flying about in terms of people who still want to be involved in some of these assets. So it's going to be very interesting. And hopefully that also allows you to have some more institutional investors in terms of the ASX.
These potential new Australian ASX investors who are mandate locked to Australia or to the ASX don't hold any shares. So they're not going to come to the London market to sell. If they come to the London market, they're coming in as buyers. So this is an opportunity. It's actually been a huge amount of work. This is more work than we appreciate. It would be less work if you're just an unlisted company and go on to the ASX or the London market. This is the team's really working hard on it, but we think it gives us an opportunity to bring new buyers onto the market, and that's got to help. So we like the idea. And again, timing can be good if there's a bit of a shake up in ASX gold investments in the future, and we don't know the result. But that just means there's going to be more ASX money allocated to gold looking for a home. And we really hope that we give them the opportunity to invest. And some of that money may be in Newcrest because they like, Havron. So, hopefully we give them a ready-made substitute. So, look, we're doing it to help the price, and hopefully that's what achieves. It's an interesting, I'm happy to unpack that a bit more if you think people will be interested, but we think it's good.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be ASX tracker funds and all sorts of things that are going to have to hold,
Look, I think that would require some liquidity on the ASX. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case, because we are probably our base case, unless something changes, is to do a compliance listing, so we wouldn't raise new money. But yes, there is already some tracking money in us. Being bigger, will bring in more tracking money. So I think you are right. Over time, we may get more ASX index inclusion, which would help. But in the short term, again, that buying comes into the London market.
Very good. Shaun Day, MD of Greatland Gold. Pleasure as always.
Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate your time.
Well, that was good. Great fun talking to those gentlemen. Always fun to catch up with Shaun as well. He's a very, very busy man. Had a whirlwind 48 hours in the city. But what else has been happening this week? I guess we can segue nicely from one biotechnology company to another. BSF Enterprise. What do you make of the news this week, Kev? They've had a good week.
Yeah, they've had a good week, and obviously announced the OTCB listing, or they've applied for it. So what we're talking, 4 to 6 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks. Who knows what the time frame was, but not too long. But it's going to be in a market where I think it's going to be appreciated a lot more than in the UK just at the minute. So it should be quite interesting, actually, when that opens up. They're going to be dragging stock over from the UK, and we should see some price action, I think. And there's lots more to come. You've got the meat tasting thing, which is supposed to be happening in the middle of April in London, in Mayfair. We're supposed to be going to that and tasting the pork fillet that they're currently growing.
Yeah.
So and there are other things as well. You've got the leather situation that's got to come as well. They said they're in negotiations with different companies. So
they had the City Mix commercial progress where they talked about the evaluation, didn't they? That was released on Monday. So they've had some good news flow this week, and I think the share price reacted in quite a good way. It was Friday closed around the 17 pence mark, so it's doing quite well. I think it dropped back to the 14p's. But it seems to have recovered quite nicely. Other bits of news this week, there was two that were sort of standouts. One of them, for probably the wrong reasons, was Atlantic Lithium. I don't know if you saw that, but you actually sent me the article. That there was a famous tweet, famous for the wrong reasons, infamous more like. Blue Orca, a company, tweeted that about basically it was related to the validity of the prospecting licenses in Zimbabwe, in Ghana, isn't it?
Ghana.
Yeah, Ghana. About the prospecting and the validity of their licenses in Ghana, and about corruption there. And obviously that they ended up suspending the shares in Atlantic Lithium. It was in reaction to an online report. It was suggesting that Piedmont Lithium, which is obviously Atlantic Lithium's partner, was involved in some underhand business practices, as you mentioned. But obviously then the shares were suspended early one morning. There was a big drop in the share price, and then they resumed trading and bounced back up to the sort of like the mid 30s. So amazing that people still write these, these sort of pieces or these dossiers on companies without any facts, just to short the price, short the stock.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know the facts, but it looks horrible what's happened, doesn't it? absolutely tragic that has happened. It did bounce back, I think, the day after, up 30%, I think it was, but still significantly lower than when the short attack.
Yeah, I mean, I
happened.
think it was like 38 to 40p, and it finished Friday around the 25. So it's very much been beaten down and not recovered. So it has had, if that was their intention, it's had the desired effect. Sadly, there was also Power Metal Resources announced news on Friday morning that the CEO Paul Johnson is to step down with immediate effect as part of a broad change in personnel at the junior miner. He'll be replaced by Shaun Wade, with Johnson remaining a part of the business to focus on commercial opportunities. He's the largest shareholder at Power Metals, and they made the announcement in a strategic update detailing their projects and IPO progress for gold and metal resources and first development resources. What are your thoughts on that? We've spoken to Paul before, and he's very much a focused individual, isn't he, on driving that company forward and value for shareholders, but came a bit of a shock.
Yeah, it was a bit shocking, and it does say in the thing that it's to do with family issues, so we wish him the best and hope all that is resolved as quickly as possible. Yeah, it was sort of his baby, so it seems strange, really. But there was some also news from Kibu Energy. Mr. Peter Alderacre has been appointed as the new Group Business Development Executive. He has a lot of experience in renewable energy and energy storage projects developed with deep technical, financial and commercial expertise. So I think that's a big move, really, for Kibu's strategy in terms of what they're talking about doing and the spin out that they're talking about doing as well. And also stated that revenue generating projects within the next 18 to 24 months, which would be an absolute game changer, I think, for that particular situation. So, yeah, that was interesting news.
There was Amur Minerals. Do you remember AMC, the Kunmani mine up in Siberia, this nickel sulfide project that was, I mean, it was like 2-3 years ago. It was very much in the hot topic back then, but it sort of just sat around the 1p mark. Basically, they completed the disposal of the Kunmani project for a 35 million consideration, which when you consider the size of the actual asset and the resources there, it's actually quite cheap. But they basically said the funds are going to be used to take the company in a new direction, and a special dividend of 1.8 pence per share will be paid to shareholders. The board noted the positive outcome to the disposal given the current geopolitical situation. Don't know if you've got any thoughts on that one.
No, what did the share price go up to then?
More Minerals, it's about 1.6p a share at the moment, a 22 million market cap, and I think it was slightly higher in the week. But it finished Friday around the 1.6 pence mark.
With a 1.8 pence dividend coming?
Yeah.
That doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
Not really.
Okay, so if anybody wants some free money, go and buy some AMC.
Go and buy AMC, because the market clearly hasn't got that one. The other one was In the Style, and we kind of talked about this, didn't we? We hit on this one, I think, a couple of weeks ago, that buying these companies that put out an RNS where they potentially could be going into administration, the shares could, be delisted, or they could be bought out. That they basically agreed or put a proposal forward to shareholders to sell its only operating subsidiary for £1.2 million. I mean, this is just such a lowball valuation. The sale was a consequence of strategic review where numerous options for a sale were explored. The company will be acquired by a UK-based family office. In the Style's existing CEO will take an equivalent equity stake in a newly established company set up to acquire the business and will take up the CEO role of the new company. I mean, who's going to win out of that situation, do you think?
Maybe the management.
Yeah, maybe the current management who've just moved it.
Just maybe.
Yeah,
we'll see. I think Conroy had some news again as well this week, did they not? They had,
their news flow has been...
So more drill results and basically more discovery of gold. There's gold in them the hills. There is gold in this whole strike. And the sooner the market sort of grasps onto this, the sort of size of this thing is phenomenal. For a company that's worth £9 million, it's absolutely unbelievable. The potential size of this gold. I mean, we've just had Greatland Gold on with a market cap of 300 and something million and a potential now of upgrade from 4.5 million ounces to 6.5 million ounces. Clay Lake and Clontribrit between them have a potential of 8 to 9 million ounces, and we've got a company worth £8.95 million. It's absolutely bizarre. I know it's a long way back from where Greatland Gold is now, but My goodness, when is anybody going to get the message?
It's bizarre. I don't know what the market needs or what needs to happen for the market to wake up. I mean, I know it's been going on for 20 years, and you do hear the odd person in the city say, "Oh, yeah, is that the same one that's been going on? You know, there's not even any gold there." And we're like, well, we've been to site. We've seen Clontiburat. We've seen the physical gold. We've seen the rocks that you can pull out of the stream, and you can see the physical gold in the rocks. I've got some in front of me like you have, and it's just phenomenal. That and they've got the joint venture under very good terms as well. So I can't quite get my head around when the market will react and actually see some value. I mean, what's the current market cap now at this price at 20 pence is £9 million. It's laughable.
No, absolutely. I mean, even the year high at 42p, whereas 20p now, even that would be vastly undervalued. But I mean,
put another zero on that, and I might start getting excited. Anything else this week?
Yep.
I think we've gone on quite long. Obviously, we've had 2 guests on. It's been a very, very busy show. But anything else you want to talk about?
No, there's plenty of stuff to look forward to. We're going to be interviewing Adam Wilson from Ben's Creek this week coming up, so look out for that one. And I think that's it. There are a few other things happening. Chill Brands is pushing on with moving out of its vape products, and we should be catching up with Callum shortly as well. That may well be next week, so we'll see. This last week that's gone by, I didn't see there was a lot of movement. The markets themselves, the FTSE's down significantly. Though it did say that the UK economy grew in January. The interesting thing is the dollar's gained back some of its strength again. I think part of that was on the basis of Powell saying, interest rates are probably going to peak higher than people had anticipated.
Yeah.
And some of the other things which are sort of seem to reflect each other, like copper's settled back down at £4 a pound, and those things are working absolutely in tandem. The dollar goes up, the copper comes down, and the same with
I don't know if you saw it, but overnight on Thursday, and I think it spooked the market. There was basically a sell-off in US banking stocks, and I think the 4 largest US banks saw their stock prices lose around about $52 billion on Thursday. Lots of talk about what it is. Trouble SVB Financials, a major Silicon Valley focused lender. And obviously, as you mentioned, Powell's, it does sound like it's almost like the Fed just don't know what they're doing. I can't get my head around how some of the, I think we're going to see more and more interest rate rises, effectively what is the language that's coming out of the US right now.
Yep. So that's it, really.
Yeah. Well, have a good weekend and the rest of it, and we'll catch up next week. Thanks for listening.
Hey, do you know we were on the Sunday roast and we never mentioned the number 7?
Yeah, I was going to say. What did I say at the end? I think I said last week that if we play as well as we've been playing of late, we will maul you. I think that's the opposite of happened. But we bounced back. We beat Real Betis 4-1, so we're back on track. Sometimes you need to be knocked down a peg or two. That's the way I look at get yourself back on.
Yeah, get back on the horse.
Back on the bike. Go.
Indeed. Yeah.
We'll see what happens with you. See what happens with you at Bournemouth. I mean, you'll probably go to Bournemouth now and lose 1-0. That'll be the comical part.
You keep saying that.
We'll see.
We'll see you next week.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net.